We have available interpretation in both English and Spanish, so just please select the channel of your preference. And for the panelists, while you are speaking, also please make sure that if you are going to speak in English, you are in the English channel, and the other way around. If you are in the Spanish channel, you should be speaking in Spanish. And with this, well, I think that we are ready to start with without more preamble. So I'm going to switch to Spanish.
Okay, so I want to give a warm welcome to everyone to this virtual meeting with different stakeholders from the data ecosystem in the Latin and the Caribbean region. So I want to give thanks again for your time, participation, and also for the shared answers and the registration form. I can say you that we were able to receive registration of more than 160 individuals from different sectors, most of them representing civil society, the academia, and statistical institutions. We are now knowing which are their expectations for this discussion, and this mainly focus over learning and sharing knowledge in regards to the collection of information. So with this, I will just want to mention that 90% of people that registered for this meeting wanted to make part of the regional working group to build data, LGBT data agenda in the Latin region and the Caribbean region. So we have a huge responsibility in this event. And so that's why that for the opening of this event, I will give the floor to Karen Anaya, Technical Secretary of the Red Sin Violencia. The floor is yours, Karen. Thank you very much. I want to give you a warm welcome. And from Global Partnership, the Red Sin Violencia, and Colombia Diversa, want to give thanks of being part of this first virtual meeting. This meeting was created and was called to have you all being able to talk, recognizing that we still have in this region a lot of absence of data in regards to LGBT people. That includes our interests, experiences, interests, and that will allow us to also to have our rights seen in the region. So in the Latin region and the Caribbean region had made progress in regards to different attempts to collect information in regards to the situation of our experiences. But nevertheless, these exercises or activities have been not well connected, have been isolated in time, and we are not really having an opportunity of having a meeting and to talk with different stakeholders regarding the data ecosystem. That's why this call is to create a dialogue space with different statistical offices, institutions, government institutions, civil society, social organizations, governments in its different levels, the academia, and other stakeholders in order to establish during this year a data regional agenda in regards to LGBT experiences. And I will give the floor now to Karen. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks again to Karen Anaya. And now I will give the floor to Karen Bed, who's the manager of policy in the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. And so Karen, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Karen. As you can see, we're many Karens going around in this conversation, but it's a real pleasure to be on this call and having a discussion around inclusive data, LGBTI data in Latin America. As mentioned by Karen Chavez, my colleague, I am the policy manager responsible. Sorry, just want to make sure that I'm giving the right language. I just switch to English. So as I was saying, I lead policy work at the Global Partnership, particularly leading our work on inclusive data. The Global Partnership is a network of over 700 organizations made up of governments, civil society, the private sector, academia, championing the data revolution. In our work on inclusive data, we see the value of ensuring that we have robust data systems that support populations that are often left out, that are often marginalized, that are often excluded, that are often muted. And really, that's our approach in inclusive data to ensure that those populations have a space and have a voice. And that requires us to look beyond official statistics, to look beyond data systems that exist, to think about what ways, what innovations, what approaches work best to ensure those populations are not left out. So the conversation today is very important for me, particularly, but also for us as the Global Partnership, because the issue on LGBTI and data systems in Latin America and the Caribbean is important to us because it's important to our stakeholders in LAC region, and therefore we want to do what we can to mobilize our network, to mobilize actors, to develop the way forward on this agenda. What we also champion under the inclusive data portfolio is ensuring that we look at data through a differential approach, through a multidimensional approach, so that populations may be excluded for various reasons, not only by one indicator or by one form of disaggregation, but we're actually looking at how those forms of disaggregation intersect and further marginalize populations. Today we'll hear lots of good practice examples from partners in the Global Partnership, but also we'll hear some of the challenges that has limited the conversation or limited the agenda. And I believe together we'll have a way forward, we'll forge what comes next. And we'll also hear from UN Stats Division around citizen data, which is promising to be a data source that can help to give nuance, to give flavor, to give additional color to official data. So with that, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us and for being interested in this conversation. I look forward to a very useful and interesting deliberations and to forging the next way forward with all of you. Thank you so much, and back to you, Karen Chavez.
Okay, thank you very much again to my colleague Karen Beth, and also for her words and her ideas. And so let's go now. And before starting with some introductions that we have from civil society and from the statistical offices, we have prepared an activity, digital activity, with a tool that is called Mural. So here we see a slide, and the idea is for you to participate from the beginning of the meeting in this type of activity. So then, please, we're going to be showing the steps, and the wall will be open during 2 hours. It's going to be in Spanish and in English. And at a certain time, you will find a link for you to be able to join the chat of this meeting. So first of all, we would like, since we have so many people and because of time issues, we cannot open the floor for everyone to introduce themselves. So please, you can include here your ideas. You can include your organization, and you also can include your name. So how can you do this? Please, you can add post-its, digital post-its right here on the left-hand side of your screen. You can choose the color of your choice. You can add the post-it, and that's the way that you can write down your name, your organization. For example, in my case, Karen Chavez, and I invite you all again to see who are present in this meeting, and you can let us know which organization you represent. And additionally to this, to know who are present here, we have prepared also some questions. Right now, we are not going to be asking them, but anyway, just to show you the questions. The first question that we would like to know about you is, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about establishing an LGBT data agenda in the LAC region? And also the previous case, you can just add a post-it and answer the question either in English or in Spanish, okay? And at the end, we also have another question that says, what are the challenges for improving the availability of LGBTIQ plus data in the region? And so these are the starting questions and also the opening space for people to start answering. So we will be talking about these questions, and in regards to the tool, to continue using those questions more or less during 60 minutes after introductory words that we have in our agenda and a panel. And during those 60 minutes, please, you are invited to join and use the tool, and you can help us to add your ideas, questions, answers in regards to the questions that we have prepared for you. So, well, with no further ado, we are ready to start and to have some introductory words to this session. So I'm also very excited to have colleagues from Colombia Diversa. And first of all, I will give the floor to Nikita Ruiz, who is a researcher of human rights in Colombia Diversa. And so Nikita, please, you have 5 minutes for your intervention. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Can you listen to me? Okay, first of all, welcome. Welcome to this place. I want to give thanks again to the organizing committee, to Global Partnership, and also, sorry, there's a huge sound around, but anyway, I just wanted to say that my name is Nikita Dupuy Vargas. I'm a researcher in regards to human rights within Colombia Diversa, and also as many people that have decided to connect themselves to this meeting because they think it's quite important to produce data in regards to, and specifically in regards to LGBT people, is because we share a struggle in common that has to do with statistical segregation. That means the invisibilization and how the different systems of information invisibilize LGBT people. This has effects, specific effects, mainly for the different social organizations and mainly for the officers that work with these people. And because it makes it so difficult to make decisions specifically in policies, public policies, and also to build goals for development. So it's quite needed then to produce data that can allow and can open the opportunity in equal conditions for social incidents. But I think that besides struggling statistics with the statistics and fight with the statistical segregation, we're also going against something to be visible in the narrative. We need to understand that the numbers, data produce narratives, and those narratives can allow to visibilize people in the common imaginary, popular imaginary, and also political imaginary. So whoever produced information and data about LGBT people are also producing new narratives over which we can generate some type of incidents. I think that another struggle that we have in regards to social organizations, academia, and the state, when we work with this, is what the LGBT activism has been doing during decades. It's in trying to controvert this co-responsibility between sex, gender, and sexuality to show some subjects that are more complicated or complex in other dynamics. But additionally to this, data production takes us to think about which are the inequality systems that allow some subjects to be visible or not for the state and for the participation of this incident. So I would like then to read in a very quick manner a paragraph of a document of this Blas Radic trans philosopher. And this is a document that says policy regarding numbers with gender policies. And he allows us to ask ourselves in regards to the numbers, who are producing those numbers? Which subjects are produced and under which criteria? So he says, that after everything that is being done now, it's not only who is included in those registers of population, but who is included in the social world, specifically on official registers and in which terms. So as many other organizations and as many people that are present here, I would recognize the challenges that have to do with the production of LGBT statisticals. And those challenges go beyond including variables. We know that those LGBT variables should be included, but this goes beyond the view. It requires gender perspective, diversity, sexual diversity perspective whenever we produce those variables. And then that takes us again, and I repeat this, to understand which are the structures that are in this inequality that are allowing LGBT people to become visible in those registers. So we have another question that we'd like to ask in regards to a document that it's called Gender Diversity in Latin America of Fernanda Stan Alba, and she asks a question. How can we visualize in statistical terms a population that needs to be hidden in the closet because of the discrimination levels, violence levels that they still have? So I think that this question is quite relevant today. Why? Because we cannot wait for numbers to come in order to produce incidents and to change social, economic, political, cultural context of LGBT people. The relation, it's whoever are activists, we know that we need to be changing the context to make them more friendly, respectful, to have LGBT people to feel safe of coming out from the closet and be visible even in statistics. So this implies then that whoever produces data, we need to work together with social cultural change, with changes on the way of LGBT people participation. So to have a register with sense and perspective, that's what perspective is. And finally, to conclude, I know about the challenge that we have in front of us in regards to technification information system, because I know that public officers and social organizations, the academia, are still continuing producing statistics in paper. But I do understand that here we have experiences, as was being mentioned by Karen Anaya. There are many successful stories in those information systems, but it's really hard to produce strategies to move that information. And the challenge that we have here has to do with numbers humanization, to show that beyond those numbers, we have people. And in the case of Colombia Diversa, we have people's stories that have been victimized and oppressed. I want to give thanks for the presentation of everyone here. And I'm sure that this is every person, every organization, every entity, every representative of the academia can help so much in regards to their perspective for the analysis regarding data production. Thank you very much. Thank you very much again, Nikita, for your intervention. And now, from the Statistical Office's intervention, I'll give the floor to Dr. Mauricio Rodriguez, who is the General Director of Social Demographic Statistics in INEGI, the Statistical Office, the Mexican Statistical Office. You have the floor. Thank you very much again. Good morning, good afternoon. Okay, so first of all, I want to give thanks for inviting me here to share from my perspective in regards to the Mexican case and the experiences that we have been having regarding the production of data. In this case, I'm going to focus more in our most recent survey, the INVICE, but also to mention that the roadmap that we have had in the survey, it was mentioned before by Nikita, after her interview, that much information comes from surveys regarding discrimination. And this was the first dimension, I would say, in regards to mention this LGBT population and this statistical projects in Mexico, but that showed us the need of continue having better numbers in order to show the reality that we have, not only in Mexico, but also in the Latin region and in the whole world. So I would like then to highlight, if it's possible, and not showing details, of course, maybe we have some questions. We want to share the relevance that we have here to have such as a statistical exercise in regards to the survey we carried out. where we were very pleased to have a response rate, very high response rate, about 87% of response rate. And most of those interviews, and a very few didn't want to answer. And this has to do with the building of the instrument, how we can have an approach from the conceptual design, the structure of the survey, including the academia, representatives of the LGBT community that were helping us, giving us feedback in regards to the way that we were building this survey and trying to have questions regarding this statistical information, and also to identify that we could use instruments in order to complete the survey. So it's quite important to highlight that precisely this close collaboration with civil society organizations was not only to show progress of the statistical program, but also to show the survey, to receive the feedback, comments. Many exercises took place in the classroom regarding some thematics and how was the best way to approach to reality. I want to share the support given by the National Council for Discrimination and the work carried out by experts that allowed a better understanding, awareness of these topics, and also the use of terms in an adequate manner on behalf of our interviewers. I say interviewers because...
Thank you, Karen, for inviting me to present, actually on behalf of the Collaborative on Citizen Data on the Copenhagen Framework on Citizen Data. It's great, huge honor to be here and to present our work, collaborative work. So my name is Hao-Yi Chen. I work at UN Statistics Division, and we're part of the Collaborative on Citizen Data. Well, so this is a new slide I added while I was listening to the opening and then the other reflections before this presentation. Because I'm actually wearing two hats. I lead work on citizen data from UNSD, but I'm also a household survey person, the coordinator for the Intersecretary Working Group on household surveys. A couple of years ago, our group worked on a sampling guidance for different population groups, and LGBTQI was part of it. And then when we were writing it, it became very obvious and clear to us it's very challenging to sample, to find, as the previous panelist speaker had talked about, people who wanted to be hidden somewhere. So for official statistics, it's a huge challenge to find our respondents. So here I put who can we find, and so it's about representation. Doing a representative household survey of LGBTQI populations is extremely challenging. And if we want to go down further to talk about leaving no one behind, talking about intersectionality, and with other characteristics, it gets even more difficult for surveys and for official data to have that information. And then the other challenge is, what are we measuring? A lot of questions that we have been asking in the past in official surveys might not be completely relevant or even asked in the right way. So these are the two challenges. I will just hear what other panelists have been talking about. So what do we bring in here? This is linked directly to the lack of data. So why are we working on citizen data as a group? It's because we are really in a very, very dire status or situation in terms of data coverage. And this is a snapshot of the 2023 UN Sustainable Development Report that has a picture on availability by goals, of data by goals. And then it's already not looking good. This is really at the aggregate level, at the global level. But if we go down further to desegregation, to lead to our pledge under the 2030 agenda for leaving no one behind, and the picture is even worse. So it's really lack of data, but it goes beyond about just data. It's really to reflecting different population groups in the data, empowers also citizens, the citizen data, to be part of the agents of change, right? And it's not just about data availability. It's in addition to improve data availability, timeliness. It's also about openness, inclusiveness, and then we provide, by working with citizen data, provide insights deeper, as Karen Beth has said, another story, different stories, more in-depth stories about our marginalized populations, including LGBTQ. So why do we work on the framework? And I mean, from UNSD point of view, we work on framework a lot. But when we started talking about the conceptual framework or citizen data, citizen generated data, citizen science data, you probably heard a lot of terminologies, and those were the confusions came when we first met as a group with national statistical offices and civil society organizations and academia. Was we should have some kind of agreement among ourselves on what we're talking about and what is the scope we would like to work on, what kind of data we're referring to. So in our first gathering in Bangkok 2022, we agreed as a group that to help us conceptualize, the framework will help us conceptualize, agree on how citizens can play a role, and then also support our actions and collaborative actions together moving forward. Only if we understand what we're talking about, then we can work on it. That's why we have the framework. How did we get there? So November 2022 in Bangkok was our first UN expert group meeting on citizen data. And then we brought that idea and the recommendations, including conceptual framework, to the UN Statistical Commission. For those of you who are not familiar with official statistics, this is a body that governs the work of statistics, official statistics at the global level. And we have chief statisticians from all countries will gather in March every year. So we brought this idea to the commission and received support from the countries, from national statistical offices, about formulating a conceptual framework and also about launching a collaborative on citizen data for us to work together. And then we launched the collaborative in April 2020, last year. And in September 2023, we went to our second expert group meeting on citizen data. Before that, we went with a very draft conceptual framework, and then we debated for 2 days heatedly about the framework. And then after that, we worked on it again and had a lot of revision and reflecting the input from the Copenhagen meeting. And we brought the draft Copenhagen framework on citizen data. So the framework has a name, a Copenhagen framework, to the Statistical Commission just a couple of weeks ago. And we did receive a lot of support, quite a lot of support. And also requests to join the collaborative to work together. These are official statisticians, or official national statistical offices. So we are bringing citizen-generated data, citizen data into the official statistics and see how we can work together. It's a very short period that we work together, but through the collaborative and partners with our colleagues, including GPSDD is a huge part of it. We were able to reach this far. So what is it, the Copenhagen framework on citizen data? In the document, I'll share a link after my presentation to the framework, draft framework. There are 4 parts. One is we're talking about the scope and definition of citizen data. And then we talk about the principles of citizen data. And third one is what are the enabling environments, what aspects are important, and a roadmap for us to work together to implement the framework. So I'll just pick a few key aspects around this operational definition of citizen data. 3 key aspects we highlighted in the paper. One is hugely about sufficient engagement of citizens. In the second, in the data, different stages of the data value chain. We put a lot of emphasis on the design and collection stage. The citizen have to have really play a big part on designing and about the data collection, and also being part of data collection, design how data are being collected and how their data will be used. And then, or if citizens or CSOs are initiator of data production, that those are citizen data. So what do we mean by sufficient engagement? We borrow the idea of level of citizen participation from many years ago, still very relevant in urban planning and also in economic development. We call it ladders or levels of citizen participation. They're insufficient. You could be for information only, holding a town hall meeting, or doing some kind of tokenized consultation, and all the way to a true partnership that we consider sufficient, or self-determination that's completely led and driven by citizens. And then here I'm going to just, I talked about the stages and citizens engagement in different stages of data value chain. And that really, we put a lot of emphasis on the beginning of the data value chain, the design stage and data collection stage. That doesn't mean the others are not important. It is very important. And then we had some discussion in the paper, in the conceptual framework, and then depend on whether it's citizen generated data or the type of citizen science data, citizens might be engaged in different stages of data value chain. We had put together 10 principles of citizen data, from independence, relevance, another way to talk about ethical and safe production and use, and openness and accessibility. We did not start from scratch. This was really adapted and extracted from existing conceptual principles. For example, the very familiar ones from the official statistics is the fundamental principle for official statistics. And then there's also citizen science principles and the human rights based approach to data. So all these were taken into consideration when formulating the principles. And we covered enabling environments and covering 8 areas from the capacity side, human capital we talk about, and we talk about laws and regulation and trust, which is extremely important. And data quality that keeps coming up, and it will still come up about what is the quality assurance requirement. It depends on how citizen data will be used, whether they will be integrated into official statistics or prefer to be alone. And we talk about funding. So these are the areas that will be used to guide our work to support countries and to support NSOs and CSOs in really further the agenda of citizen data. So what is the roadmap moving forward? We have a lot of ambition, very ambitious. We talk about mobilized partners and resources. We talk about, we are going to finalize the framework. So from now to the end of this year, we are working on case studies and gathering experiences to see whether the framework, this is a draft conceptual framework. Right now it's open for consultation. I'll share the link at my last slide. But it's really about refining the framework. We want to make sure the framework works with those working and all of you are working in countries on the ground with the communities and really working directly with citizen data. And next step is really to implement the framework. And we want to advocate for this work, for your work. And so bring you more resources, more support. And from the UNSD side, of course, we work closely with national statistics offices and would like to support NSOs and also support the CSOs through the national statistics offices as well. Ultimately, we would like to have really foster or encourage similar structures and collaborations at the national level, formed by different stakeholders. So what's next? We have already presented our conceptual framework, draft framework to the Commission, and 2024, as mentioned, will be developing case studies and testing. And then we are going to summer a third expert group meeting. And then afterwards, next March, we would like to present a finalized, or at least for the stage, understanding that it will continue to evolve, the conceptual framework, and the citizen data field will continue to evolve. So we'll be talking about presenting this work next year as well to the Statistical Commission, and then implementation. So before I close my presentation, is really a huge thanks to our steering committee members of the collaborative on citizen data, and to the members of the expert group that we've been working with, and to a lot of stakeholders who've been reaching out to us and to provide their input, to express interest to work with us. And we really hope this collaborative can be a platform to really support everybody and bring expertise and share knowledge and experiences. And for example, for the data agenda that you're working on today, or we're working on today, and we really like to advocate for this work and bring the experience, for example, from this region to other regions, and with the platform of the collaborative. We will be working on guidance, methodological guidelines that identify through our experience working with the National Civil Office and civil society organizations and other data stakeholders. My last slide, we are doing the consultation for the conceptual framework, so there's a website link, and please submit your input if you'd like to join the collaborative or work with us to test and pilot it, or to hear more from us about what's going on citizen data, what's going on with the collaborative, and email us. And there's an email, citizen.data@un.org. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you so much, Karen, for inviting us.
Thank you, Haoyi. Thanks for your patience in regards to the interpretation problem. Sorry about that. And I hope that we can really have this experience and to take it to this initiative that we're working with. So I'm going to give the floor now to Jillian Solano. Thank you very much again, Belgis, and for giving me this time to speak. And also I want to give thanks to the organizing committee for including statistical offices into this type of work. It's great that we can participate in this type of meetings and hear about different perspectives, and also to propose solutions from our role regarding the civilization of this population. And for this second part, we're going to be having a panel that indeed is to continue with this conversation, to go deeper precisely with the different initiatives and applications that are taking place in regards to different stakeholders regarding data collection. So we will be hearing about experiences of the civil society, statistical offices, the government, academia. And for this, I will give the floor to Roberta Clark. Roberta is the CEO and rapporteur regarding LGBT rights of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. Roberta, for your intervention, you will have 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Are you hearing me well, Julius? Is the audio working? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay,
can hear
thank
you
you.
well.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Judith, and thank you for inviting the Commission to participate with you today. I want to recognize the Regional LGBTI Information Network Without LGBTI Violence, Colombia Diversa, and the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data for this invitation. We know only too well that members of the LGBTI community experience discrimination, hate crimes, and social exclusion. The alarming rates of violence, including physical and verbal abuse, highlight the urgency of our collective efforts to create a more inclusive and non-discriminatory society. The persistent discrimination against LGBTI persons, or those who are perceived as such, is closely linked to the existence of gendered, social, and cultural prejudices. These prejudices pervade state institutions, even when laws and policies have been reformed to advance the equal rights of the LGBTI community. We must therefore deepen our work to raise society's awareness of the experiences of harm and discrimination, whether that is occurring in families, in communities, or within state institutions. This is a necessary pathway to combat it and to eliminate stigmatization and stereotypes against the LGBTI population, and also, and importantly, to increase access to justice and access to non-discriminatory social services. We know about violence and discrimination, but most often, mostly through anecdotal evidence and through the work of LGBTI human rights defenders such as yourselves. In its thematic reports, the Commission has observed that most states in the region do not still have reliable statistics that reflect the true dimensions of discrimination. Not only do people not report violations for fear of indifference and discrimination, so there's underreporting going on, but many states do not collect data on harm suffered disaggregated by the motive for violence and the gender identity and/or sexual orientation of victims. This makes this harm, as well as the needs and interests of the LGBTI community, invisible to public policymakers and facilitates the persistence of stereotypes and prejudices that perpetuate historical marginalization of LGBTI persons based on discrimination. In its 2018 report on progress and challenges for guaranteeing the rights of LGBTI persons, the Commission emphasized the absence of data and the invisibility of the situation, especially of violence, and that invisibility results in the absence of adequate public policies, adequate legislation aimed at ending structural discrimination. Therefore, we've recommended several things to member states, and I will speak to 3 or 4 things now. First of all, we call on member states to implement policies to collect and analyze statistical data on violence and discrimination appropriately disaggregated. Such data, if disaggregated, can be used to determine when violations result from the intersection of discrimination based on sexual and gender diversity and other grounds of discrimination, such as, for example, race, ethnicity, disability, age, nationality, geography, and socioeconomic status, amongst other factors. We also call upon states to use the data collected. So collecting it is not enough. To use it to guide the development of laws, policies, and guidelines that guarantee the recognition and implementation of rights of LGBTI persons. We call upon the states to make sure that the people who carry out this data collection are properly trained in matters of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, body diversity, and human rights. We call upon states to create mechanisms to guarantee the security and confidentiality of the data collected, and to use that data in trainings for public officials as a strategy to not only prevent discrimination, but also to change institutional state practice. And very importantly, we call on judicial and police systems to properly receive and record human rights violations suffered by LGBTI persons. So they must receive, they must record, and they must redress violations suffered by LGBTI persons through due diligence, investigations, prosecutions, and the like. The Commission has consistently called upon states to implement data collection policies to safeguard the human rights of LGBTI persons. And so, for this reason, we are really appreciating the spaces like this one, with the participation of state statistical institutions and civil society organizations together, as they allow us to discuss how data collection efforts should be shaped. It allows us to share experiences regarding challenges, share good practices or better practices, and also build networks for collaboration, which of course is vital. I want to close by extending the offer of the Commission of Technical Cooperation to member states and civil society organizations to work on continuing to implement data collection efforts and to strengthen them in places where they exist, and to start them in places where they may not exist. Thank you very much. Spaces of solidarity like this are really important.
Thank you very much for your ideas and your words. Facing the importance of promoting this type of meetings, exchange of experiences, and to share what's done well, what we have as challenges, and what has become a barrier to make these initiatives difficult, and also the importance of recognizing the challenging context that sometimes this population faces to be able to be visible from the different statistics. So with these elements in mind, we will hear now from the perspective of the academia. And for this, I will give the floor to Miguel Fuentes, research analyst for the international program of the Williams Institution from the California Institution. Please, Miguel, go ahead. You have 5 minutes, please, for your intervention. Thank you very much again, Juliet. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Sí, te
Okay,
escuchamos.
thanks again for your time. I want to give thanks to the organizing committee. As was being said, I represent the Williams Institution. We are an institution, research institution within the California University at LA, working with different research and public policy regarding LGBT groups and international research program. I would like to start recognizing that the data collection is quite important for the development of policies, especially in topics that have to do with sexual diversity and so on. So sometimes whenever we want to collect this information, we have so many challenges ahead of us, technological challenges, economic challenges, human resource challenges. And from the Williams Institute, we have achieved to have 3 different collaboration areas with different stakeholders. And so with our own experience, I would say that first one has to do with private companies, private entities. The second one has to do with government institutions, and the third one with civil society networks. And I know that these are not exhaustive, but we can mention experiences that I hope can be useful as an example and also an invitation to collaborate. So in regards to the first collaboration topic has to do with private entities, Williams Institution has found that sometimes that research institutions do not have the capacity to carry out our tasks with a big sample, big representative samples of LGBTQ plus people that have been surveyed. So what we're doing is to get closer to those surveyors that have access to those interest groups, and at the same time, they do not have the technical information about how to ask about gender, sexual identity, and so on. And that's the way that we can match our efforts. That's something we did during 2018. That was a collaboration with Ipsos, a global server company, and through their participation panel called Web Advisor, which is a monthly sample. We're able to have the participation of about 19,000 people from age 18, 16 countries of the world. We were able to ask them about an opinion survey about rights of trans people, and we were able to have within Ipsos to identify countries with higher internet capacity, and then we're able to find that 60% of people in the 16 countries, including Brazil and Mexico, they wanted to have support of trans people. 60% thought it was quite important to have a law protecting discrimination against trans people. Our second web collaboration was to work with government institutions. Sometimes we see that government institutions do not collect information, or maybe they do not do it in a way that we can use it because they do not have that technical precision. So what we're doing is from the Williams Institution on one hand to include measures, let's say questions asked about sexual orientation, gender, sexual character, and on the other hand to guarantee that the measures should show the best practices, for example, to ask questions about the steps around gender identity, actions carried out, identification of this type of experiences around these 3 scopes of sexuality. And in the USA, for example, and also outside USA, since 2015, we're working with the Health Institution of California to include measurements regarding sexual identity and gender, not exactly but during these years, we have been able to have interviews in this sample regarding including people in 58 of the counties, and some questions that can allow us to see what is happening regarding to their health identified LGBTQ plus people has been very useful because this has allowed the Williams Institution to explain and to share information with the government of the state of California to be able to work with strategies to compare information regarding LGBTQ plus people and answers that can be more friendly. And thanks to this information, this year we were able to publish of course, data published, collected between 2015 and 2020, a report regarding immigrants. And that was quite important because most of those immigrants come from Mexico and some others come from Central America, and very short percentage come from other countries. But it was quite interesting to see that most of them have a poverty level, comparing it with other migrants that are LGBTQ+, and most of those migrants have no documents, they have no green card, and those are the ones that most suffered regarding poverty. And at the end, we found other workaround with civil society, because many times we can offer this technical experience to those civil society organizations. That was done in 2012, 2013. We're able to develop a form that was able to fix a problem that the government had at that time, that they wanted to have a survey regarding gender, but it was not exactly exhaustive to include different identities of gender. That was a survey that was not statistical representative, but at least it was used to have the government understanding that they still need to include other type of gender expressions. And most and half of people answering the survey developed with Blue Diamond Society, most of half of them used other expressions. And the last survey or the last census carried out was the category of others, and another question was left open. So those local activism can use these categories for them to work with activism, and the following census will include also this type of local definition. So again, we know that these are some of the possible interventions that we can carry out. We know those are not exhaustive, but this is an invitation for you to help with us, with our institution. This data that I mentioned, it's also mentioned in a report that we have published. It's called Expansion Data Collection about the Gender Identity. And you can read this report. Thank you very much again. Thanks again, Miguel, for your time and to show us different applications with different stakeholders, the private sector, to be able to strengthen data collection processes, but also in a certain manner to see which are the stakeholders at local level, and also from the state of California and other countries that maybe can have less capacity and higher challenges and cultural challenges to make this population visible. And as you had mentioned, the civil society from Nepal, that we hope that this can help to make more visible this population in the context of census situation. And with these elements, we can now go to our third panel member, Khaled Orozco from Uniban, Movimiento Unido de Defensa de Belice. Caleb, you have 5 minutes again for your intervention. Thank you very much. I think you're muted. Caleb, you're muted.
Oh, shucks. Okay, here we go. So for us here in Belize, it's recognizing the need to navigate the politics of administration. And what does that mean? It means our Statistical Institute of Belize does macro level data collection around inflation, around GDP. It does not have any money for a population-based approach. It does not have any money for a population-based approach for dealing with various populations like LGBT. So you have to then go find money. And so my work with them is transnational with my colleague Phil Crehan in proving that we can produce LGBT report in this country, in lobbying the World Bank executive directors for support of funds, in hand-holding our NSO Director General and her boss in development of a concept note, in recognizing that the politics between the World Bank and the state is that CSOs are not to be included as clients. In fact, only states are clients. Our process is a 3-year process that started in February 2021. And we realized that because the system does not have any experience collecting LGBT information, we would have to show them how. Lobbying is a critical part of this process because the system doesn't really care about desegregating its development discussion around LGBT issues or creating a culture of desegregation. We recognize that the data infrastructure, a strong data infrastructure that reflects desegregation does not exist in the country. We also recognize that data collection is binary, so it recognizes male, female. It does not recognize anything else in its labor force survey, for example. What's clear to me as well is that this work requires a lot of monitoring through the lens of the progressing on SDG, through the lens of progressing around the voluntary national report, through the lens of checking to see if government has followed up with the World Council, no, the World Bank. And it helps to have somebody who knows the system of the World Bank to follow up. And I see monitoring is important because government representatives seem to have a psychology of entitlement, a psychology of you're less than once working with CSO. And so there is that issue of what it means to unpack a partnership. With that said, we all have to acknowledge something which we don't discuss here. Those challenges are systemic marginalization, which needs to be unpacked, the psychology and bias with regards to delegitimizing the lived experience of LGBT people on the ground, unpacking the fact that certain countries, for example, in the Caribbean, has to remove certain sexual intimacy laws, buggery, sodomy law, depending on where you are, in order to start the conversation. And for me, as an advocate slash activist, I have very little patience for forked tongue communication. In fact, I've come to appreciate the term katemai and honing. One speaks to presenting your feelings as you would want the public to see it. The other one speaks to your private feelings or your true thoughts. I don't have any patience for forked tongue conversation. I have patience for you setting a time, a date, commitment to act, commitment of resources. And so I've struggled with dealing with the forked tongue approach that state representatives have with regards to their commitment to data collection. So they can do data collection around men who have sex with men with HIV, but they don't have an investment or a commitment to invest around LGBT population or looking at the size estimate population. They don't have an interest in addressing a legal review around the socioeconomic concerns of LGBT population, but they can do an MSM population size estimate. How does that work? That you can say, you can find money to do one thing, but the burden of doing a population size estimate study for LGBT population in the country falls on the CSO. How does that work? And also what I realize is that a heteronormative tendency to collect data, your male, your female, and so on, tends to skew people's understanding of the lived narrative of LGBT people on the ground. And so they design platforms that says male, female, but has no bearing or acknowledgement. They erase the issues of sexual orientation and gender identity on the platform. And that in itself is an own battle, in its own battle, because if you're discussing, for example, UN statistical indicators, for which most of them are macro level indicators, which tends to erase population-based data, then how do you deal with that? When we're talking about SDGs, especially about inequality 10, How do you deal with the attitude of tending to erase the lived experience of populations, and you know they're there? But this isn't just a situation for LGBT, it's a situation for sex workers, persons with disability, and the list is long. I will close there by, saying that it's not just a matter of technical expertise. It's a matter of unpacking the psychology in the system that says we're hard to reach population. Yes, we're hard to reach population if you're not interested in addressing the civil rights concerns of the population, or you're telling me it is too controversial. How is it too controversial to address the civil and socioeconomic rights concerns and the data needs of a population, but it's not controversial to collect our taxes when we pay through income tax or sales tax? The hypocrisy is real, and so when we're talking about data collection, we must unpack the hypocrisy in engaging National Statistical Organization and the psychology that they bring to the table. I'm finished.
Thanks again, Khaled, for your intervention. And to be efficient with time use, I will give the floor now to Ronald Céspedes, Joint Delegate of Bolivia, Defensa del Pueblo from Bolivia. And please, 5 minutes to be able to have a QA session at the end. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Okay. Wishing you the best. Greetings from La Paz, from the plurinational government of Bolivia. Thanks again for inviting us to speak from the Ombudsman Office to be able to participate in this event. So for us, it's quite important because in general terms, the different national institutions regarding human rights do have many competencies that are well connected with generation of data, mainly with this generation of data. The other things I would like to highlight to start my dialogue or short 5-minute introduction, that the work carried out by national institutions regarding human rights, as we have in the Ombudsman Office, started in 1993 with this framework that was called the Paris Principles, that at the end give a framework to the different attributions, competencies, and what we expect to have from different national institutions regarding human rights in regards to the promotion and safeguarding of human rights in the world. The Ombudsman Office of Bolivia has been able to work during 25 years and different constitutional moments, but at this time, some of the main elements has been precisely the issue that has to do with data collection, data management, to have this being used for the Ombudsman Office and for the incidents within its competencies. But why is this important? Why is this important for human rights institutions, ombudsman's offices, and other human rights offices data regarding LGBTQ plus population? Because on one hand, these principles that I mentioned, such as the Paris Principle, mention that human rights institutions should monitor violations of human rights in their countries. And it is clear that the monitoring activity of human rights violations, these violations regarding human rights of LGBTQ plus population, require to have data. We need to have data that can allow identify not only discrimination patterns, violations, stigma, and to other vulnerable populations, but also to allow to make visible the data, that this can enable to improve the approach of those institutions at national level regarding human rights, regarding the stigma, discrimination, and violence. That's why the data collection from different human rights institutions is quite important, because that can improve the use of data regarding the perspective of making impact in public policies, because yes, some of the most important principles of human rights institutions that we have the mandate of making an impact in the state to generate public policies towards different matters, but also with emphasis in human rights of vulnerable population. And vulnerable populations precisely are populations of the people that are gay, that are lesbians, bisexual, transsexual, transgender, intersexual, and part of other sexual orientations and expressions, gender expressions, in such a way that starting, as we see here, the monitoring of violations to human rights, the approach of discrimination, the stigma and violence that allows them to qualify the human rights institutions in regards to advisory and sensitivity of human rights of LGBT population, because this data precisely the competencies regarding to what's happening with people that are part of these LGBT communities, they can act in favor of Ombudsman Office in order to recognize the levels of vulnerability of these populations and how the state, but also how the civil society and ombudsman offices are needing to make awareness in regards to understanding the needs of these communities, the complexity of vulnerability that these communities are going through, and that at the end, we are, as we have said before, we're part of a sector that is very vulnerable and over which we have a historical depth, which is quite important because many of the vulnerabilities regarding discrimination, violence, stigma are caused from structural phenomena over which the state has not covered. And in this context, in order to complete my talk, given the fact that we talk about monitoring, about violations of human rights of LGBT communities, the approach of discrimination, stigma, and violence, the advisory and awareness from the state and to the people in general, this allows to have human rights institutions to promote policies, inclusive policies, where we can make visible, of course, starting with data, we can see or show the need that we have, such as LGBT communities in regards to health, employment, housing, education, and other topics that allows our population to develop. And in this context, we also have human rights institutions to have the duty of implementing data as a very important element for our work, because that allows us to have a follow-up of progress made, delays made regards rights of LGBT communities. I would like to finish with this information. In general terms, the different national institutions that have to human rights, the Ombudsman Office, when they have these elements, they have two different parameters that are quite important. First, the generation of reports, where we can include some data that can help with the impact of the work carried out by Ombudsman Office regards the state, and to say, okay, please, government, these are the numbers regarding vulnerability, the way that we have been affecting LGBT communities' rights, and on the other hand, Ombudsman Office to receive cases that are being known by the Ombudsman Office or District Attorney's Office, where we can intervene in regard to our competencies. For the case of Ombudsman Office, the reports are giving recommendations that should be of mandatory compliance from the state. But besides, when we receive cases, we are stakeholders under the constitutions to present different constitutional resources, for example, abstract actions regarding the Constitution, concrete actions in the Constitution. That means that we can also take to the court cases according to the severity, level of vulnerability, to be able to safeguard rights of these communities. But we have two sides that are very strong. And with this, I would like to complete my intervention. Those ombudsman reports, where we need to include data over which we cannot impact the decisions and also cases that we take as records. And at the end, in another time, very gladly, we can share with you our data, our information in our office regarding cases that have been recorded regarding vulnerations to the LGBT community. I want to give thanks again that the circumstances and the Ombudsman Office member has allowed me to be I'm part of LGBT community, and this is quite important. We need, as LGBT community, to also to include ourselves and to visibilize our actions in places such as ombudsman offices, district attorney's offices, because our scope, our activities make awareness and other human rights organizations about the main topics that are still pending, that are affecting us as gay men, as trans men, as bisexual men, women, lesbian women, bisexual women, men and women that are trans, intersexual men and women, as you see, to visibilize our as individuals and to visibilize this topic, because at the end, I'll send you 2 more links. The first one of the report we have issued about the situation of LGBT people in Bolivia, which is the first report produced during 25 years. So you can see what we're doing. And also this other book that we have published with the Ombudsman Office in regards of rights of the LGBT community. So again, I'm ready for the Q&A session. And thanks again for allowing me to talk here and to share with you. A big hug. Thank you very much again, Ronald. We are very glad to receive your hug, especially it is much needed to generate agreements in regards to how we can, as a region, we can really accept those challenges and approach those challenges. Now we have Maria Isabel Ibanez. She's the chief of the Statistical Department, Gender Department of the Statistical Office of Chile. Please, Maria Isabel, the floor is yours. 5 minutes, please. Please be short. Thank you. Thanks again. Good morning. I'm going to share about the experience we have been having in our statistical national institution, as was been said before. During this meeting, during the past few months, we have an increase of the need of having statistical information, and also about the progress made regarding reality of diversities and the demand of the civil society about the needs of information and relationship about different sexual orientations. In this context, in year 2018, as statistical institution, we started to work in this type of service regarding sexual orientation in the different statistical operations that we carry out in the country. We have started with an international survey, and then we started to have some other tests carried out. We had pilot tests carried out, and all of this together in a parallel work with the different civil society organizations. And with this, in year 2022, we're able to launch a document that is called Standardization of Questions to Measure Information of Gender, Sex, and Sexual Orientation addressed to population surveys. This document has 4 questions. 1 question about sex, another question about gender, and then another question, if there's no coincide match between those 2, then we have a 3rd question about trans classification, and the 4th about sexual orientation. This document has many strengths, and we can compare data with what was collected. And with this, we can have a better idea and make more visible about the LGBTQ plus communities and with the different statistical relationships. And also it does allow to carry out an statistical projection regarding human rights and gender, and to visibilize the statistical of people that are LGBTQ plus. This document and this work carried out, it's not only about the questions being asked, but also includes recommendations, orientations for the interpretation of the questions and the design of the questionnaire. Some examples of these questions are, for example, the location. The one first recommendation is that the question regarding sexual orientation shouldn't be located because it could be stigmatizing the people. That should be regarding, another recommendation would be the question regarding sex and genders should always be consecutive, and also that the question regarding classification of trans people shouldn't be omitted and should be after the question that has to do with gender. So then to this date, this questionnaire regarding the measurement of gender and sex and sexual orientation has been applied in different activities. For example, the urban survey, the population survey of housing in Chile, and the pilot project of family issues. And we have included this in another survey, not only of our institution, but we're also talking with different institutions, public institutions, to be able to implement this type of questions and to standardize these questions in other public institutions. And to complete my intervention, I would like to share with you that during 2023, we were able to have a follow-up about the application of this standard and this type of questions. So we're able to see that those questions could be useful. And our first conclusion has 3 dimensions. The first dimension is about the people that complete the survey, and there's a positive reply. And at the end, we need to train our people with the application of these questions, because we have seen that in the field, sometimes people skip questions or they suggest alternatives, which is not what is recommended to do in the field. In the field, we're able to see there are some type of confusions, conceptual confusions. Therefore, it's needed to continue disseminating and making awareness. And also that if it's true that we have some negative response, in no case we can continue working with the survey without a problem. Regarding privacy protocols, we're able to see that indeed this is a very important element, and the people have devices for them to answer questions. We need to improve technology to give more privacy to respondents. And facing to these challenges that we have is to fix and to improve the surveys, and also as a country to develop and to work about the sexual diversities that we have in our country. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I was muted, sorry. So I was saying, so we will give the floor to Luisa Beao in regards to LGBT inclusion from PNUD. 5 minutes, please, for your intervention, Juliet. Thank you, Juliet. Thanks for inviting me. I'm going to be talking in English.
So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm also accompanied by my colleague, Juana Cook from UNDP's Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. So I just wanted to frame that. And I'll try to be very quick because I know we're almost at the hour, but I want to divide this into 2 important things from UNDP's end. First, I want to talk about something called the UN LGBTI Inclusion Index that some of you who I see here have participated very closely. And then I want to very quickly run through some data projects that have happened in the region by our regional office from UNDP. So I'll start with the UN LGBTI Index, which is a framework of 51 indicators that were developed on 2016 to 2018 to come out with this framework and the indicators for data collection when it comes to LGBTI issues. The idea behind the LGBTI index is that we use also the SDGs frameworks that have been mentioned before, as an idea of collecting the data that everyone has mentioned, and I saw at the board on the lack of data that we have. So the idea is having this framework for the data collection. Within the 51 indicators, we have 5 areas, which is education, health, economic well-being, political participation, security, and violence. So these 5 different areas that the data can be collected and the different indicators. And we do have indicators that are separated by sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics, making it possible in a way to see different ways of inclusion when we disaggregate the populations when we talk about LGBTI as a whole. So the idea of the LGBTI index is that it would be implemented by member states so that we could then collect all this data. We do have 21 countries who volunteered to collect the data. We have 7 countries who have finalized a pilot of 24 indicators, so not all of the indicators. And within those 7 countries, we have 3 in the region, those being Ecuador, the Dominican Republic, and Guyana. Other countries that we have around the globe that did it are Pakistan, Vietnam, New Zealand, and Georgia. But I want to focus a little bit in the region, specifically on Ecuador, that the project is still ongoing. So the idea is that country offices of UNDP with civil society, with governments, when all of that is possible, work on implementing and piloting the UN LGBTI index. And the idea behind that is that we understand what is the data and we have comparable data between the countries when it comes to the index. Ecuador I use as an example because there is a continuation on the project right now. They are planning on launching a report and having more information on this. I'll also share with colleagues as soon as we have our global report on the UN LGBTI index, but happy to share information on the indicators and everything that has done before with civil society consultation and with member states consultation. So I don't spend a lot of time talking about this. I also want to bring some information on different reports and dashboards that have come from our regional Latin American and Caribbean team. Starting by the national being LGBTI survey in the Dominican Republic. That was the first national effort to document social demographic situation and living conditions of LGBTI people that happened in 2021. The survey for the production of information on socio-demographic characteristics and the human rights of LGBTI population in Central American region that covered Belize, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, and Panama. That came out in August 2023. The human rights of intersex persons in Barbados, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Jamaica that came out in 2022, showing the importance of also collecting data on sex characteristics when it comes to the region, which is a lack of information that we have globally, but also in the region. And last but not least, the National LGBT Survey in Jamaica that came out in September 2023, aimed to assess and produce insights on the impact of the exclusion, stigma, and discrimination on the lived experiences of LGBTI persons in Jamaica. And this is particularly interesting considering the still criminalization of consensual same-sex activities by the country. So I'm going to leave it there because I know it is a lot of information, and happy to share any reports and information with colleagues as well. And thank you once again for having us here.
Thank you very much again, Luisa. And so we'll be closing this panel with the invitation of Jose Luis Plaza, coordinator of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in UN in Colombia. So please, Jose Luis, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Jose Luis Plaza. I'm the coordinator of the High Commissioner of UN Office for Human Rights Office. On behalf of Juliet Rivero, special greetings. And she couldn't come here because of her agenda, and she wanted me to share this word on her behalf. Human rights are under the idea that everyone should be protected against discrimination. Every human being are free and have the same rights. This is the base of our mandate established in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Human rights are for everyone without an exception. Lesbian, gays, bisexual, trans, intersexual, queer, and other people with different orientations and expressions that are hegemonic. They have the rights of not being object of violence, discrimination, vulnerable. But we still face many challenges, and we still document several violations and abuse against LGBT people in the region. Besides this, people are facing discrimination in their work, in their home, in education, in health, in housing, and access to public utilities, amongst others, including discrimination ways based on intersectional of different factors such as sex, race, age, poverty level. And so this situation is really bad, and we need to do something about it. Recent reports, such as the one produced against violence and discrimination because of sexual orientation and gender orientation, and the rapporteur, special rapporteur about human rights defender, that highlights how people with gender, non-hegemonic gender expression are object of violence and are being attacked because of their gender identity or sexual orientation. So this is quite important to remind the principles of Julia Carpo, principles that apply the standards of international legislation regarding human rights to problems that affect LGBT communities. And also we have other tools such as the Protocol of Hope that mentions the elimination of bias, stereotypes, prejudices on behalf of public officers that can take to blame victims because of what has been happening, or minimize threats that have been suffered, or more to interfere with the investigations. The independent expert about protection against violence and discrimination because of sexual orientation and gender orientation has highlighted in 2022 the lack of proof regarding the need of people or communities, LGBT communities plus which establishes several barriers for the planning, allocation of resources, and data collection for the follow-up and assessment of people being affected, LGBT people being affected. It happens that they suppress or deny the sexual orientation as an applicable framework in regards to the human rights application. In relation to this, the expert requests the state members to do as possible on the political and technical side to assess victimization of LGBTIQ plus communities, first to map and to collect data, to publish data, assuring that the collection of data should be safe places for these people. Especially, they highlight that the base of official data regarding conflict should break down data regarding gender orientation, sex orientation, promoting an assessment of different experiences, and avoiding to stigmatize diverse LGBT regarding the conflict. Precisely, this is part of a commitment reached in the Agenda 2030 about carrying out a breakdown of statistical data to help with the acquisition of this information, and the premise of not leaving anyone behind. Lack of information, it's a barrier that we face, and to reach this objective, we require solid data, robust data, information based on evidence in order to produce public policies. A statistical focus based on human rights improves the quality and the use of data, and also statistical data in regards to human rights norms. From the Office of the High Commissioner of the UN for Human Rights, we highlight 6 different principles and recommendations to conform data regarding human rights and breakdown of data, identification, transparency, privacy, accountability. I will send you the link to this document using this chat so you can check it out in a more detailed manner, in a summarized manner. Those principles assure the participation of interested groups in the task of that statistical collection regarding the design, collection, dissemination, interpretation of data. Their participation is quite important to keep trust in data and in statistics. For this, we should not only generate dialogue and offer strengthening capacity activities for vulnerable groups that have suffered the social stigmatization and negative stereotypes, but also to assure the return of information for this population to avoid problems in the future. We have the breakdown of data. This allows to compare different populations and to understand what's going on in each group, having information about the degree of inequality and discrimination that we can have. So we highlight the importance of now, one, to adopt standards and methodologies that are common for data collection, allowing to compare and to have an effective regional follow-up, and to build formats that can allow identification and analyze different forms of disparity and discrimination, of course, considering the different situations that we can see in the same person, and also to have efforts carried out to have breakdown of data to include sectors that have been excluded, such as people without a home, or people that are in institutions, and so on. The third principle has to do with self-identification. They can be able to self-identify themselves without negative repercussions. Data collection should keep in mind human rights of not producing harm and not producing harm to people implied, and personal characteristics should be used only for the benefit of groups and social groups, and the activities regarding data collection shouldn't generate discrimination, prejudice, or stereotypes, or to reinforce what we already have. Transparency is quite important. Information provided should be clear and of free access. Official statistics should be public and accessible. Then we have privacy. Information open should be protected and should guarantee its privacy, keeping the confidentiality of the information. Finally, the accountability. People in charge of data collection are having the mandate of protecting human rights. This statistics should comply a very important role with its use to elect people that have to do with human rights. In this sense, the Office of the High Commissioner of the UN has recommended different indicators to assess the degree of commitment and the progress made in its consecution. So for them, it's quite important to make awareness and to train people in regards to collecting data regarding gender information. So they should collect information in a very respectful manner. The articulation between civil society organizations, the academia, international bodies, it's quite important to identify the effort made. Data allows to visualize inequalities, identify violence patterns, and patterns that have put a barrier to access to justice, health, and education, and to demand changes. We recognize challenges that we have towards building LGBT data agenda. This includes stigmatization, fear to stigmatization, and lack of inclusive questions in surveys, and even in national census. Those are needed. Strategies in regards to data collection are necessary to show diversity of LGBTQ plus people and to build a data agenda in the Latin region, the Caribbean region. It's a very complicated task, but quite necessary. Data shows evidence to reclaim changes in defense of human rights of these communities. We need to work ahead with a lot of commitment to build a more inclusive society and fair for everyone, independently of our sexual orientation, identity, of gender expression. Thank you very much again for your time, for inviting me here, and for allowing the High Commissioner Office to participate. Thank you. Thank you very much again, Jose. Quite interesting. It has been quite challenging to be able to keep time as a moderator. We recognize that this is a nice way of knowing your own experiences and to hear of everyone. I want to close now. They have requested me with 30 seconds for each of the panel members in such a way that they can introduce a key message, final words, but especially for you to keep in mind what you have heard from other panel members and how you can use these elements to give a key message for our attendees, the ones that have being connected. We have 71 people attending this meeting. That means that people are quite interested on talking about these topics. I will be strict with time, and for this, we'll be starting this interventions with Miguel Fuentes. Please, Miguel, 30 seconds. Okay, key message would be that we should continue with this collaborative work. We should count with the experience of the academia, the civil society, and resources that other institutions have. And we think that this regional work should be the best one to continue with these good practices and to implement them in the future. Thank you. Thank you very much again, Miguel. Now, I will give the floor to Caleb. If you hear me, you have 30 seconds, please. Final conclusions.
The struggle continues in navigating the politics and the psychology of systemic marginalization. Did you hear me? The struggle continues in unpacking systemic marginalization and finding resources to build a data infrastructure that is inclusive of LGBT in small economies like Belize, which only has $1.9 billion in GDP. And that's my message I leave with everybody.
Let's continue now with Ronald. Ronald, please go ahead. Final words, 30 seconds, please. Thanks again for allowing me to talk today during this important event. So I think that I will say that we have seen that there's a need of building a regional agenda for LGBT data in the region. A way of doing it as the exchange of documents as we're doing here with this chat, we also need to think on having a network to connect data in regards to LGBT matters that should include ombudsman offices, civil society, academia, the government, and other stakeholders to be able to strengthen the incidents in favor of our rights. And I will say I want to give thanks Global Partnership, Colombia Diversa, and the LGBT network Sin Violencia for inviting me over. Thank you very much again, Ronald. Let's continue now with Maria Isabel, please. Thanks again. So I think that the conclusions could be that it's needed to continue working ahead with this questions and identification of sexual identity and gender identity to generate data that can allow to make decisions and also to make progress in public policies with identification and characterization of these groups. Thank you. Thank you. Luisa, please, the floor is yours. Okay, in 30 seconds, I would say that it is important to, in regards to what was being said before, I think it's quite important, but we need to have precise indicators. We need to collect data in a more precise manner that people in our LGBTQ plus movement should understand that human rights are important, yes, but also methodology, technique to collect information is quite important. Not only talking about violence whenever we talk about data, we'll also talk about housing, education, health, access. It's also quite important. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you very much. And Jose Plaza, please, your 30 seconds. Thanks again. Yes, I want to emphasize the need of having a scope, very refined scope with specific populations. that are being discriminated and are being vulnerated, but they do have some territorial context that is specific. The indigenous communities and Afro-descendant people, Rome people that have geographic situations that are difficult for their access, and also for the entities of the state, whenever they want to carry out a survey, it's quite important to use a methodology that can include these communities and also to face those challenges that we can have in a context such as the Colombian context, but also the Latin American context. Okay, I want to give thanks again for being so judicious with your time. I want to give thanks again for your inputs. So I think we all go back home with a key idea. It's important to have data collection. It's important to visualize data. We have so many technical challenges in regards to how we design instruments and to have an approach to measure this information. And we have some challenges in regard to cultural context, social context, where we need to work in order to have this measurement. But nevertheless, the collaboration has been the main aspect mentioned, such as the alternative to listen, to know, and to work in a very articulated manner. So we do have so much to learn among the different communities, and we invite you all to keep this conversation alive in our agreement. So with these elements, and giving thanks again for your time and to be able to learn more, I will give the floor to Karen Chavez and to Karen Anaya so they can close the meeting. Thanks again. Thanks again, Juliet. So right now we will go back to the answers that were asked in the wall. As you see here, this first activity, we have established some questions. I'm going to be talking about the two first ones that are the ones related to what do you think whenever we mention LGBT data, and which are the challenges that we face to have data available and also in our countries. But nevertheless, while I introduce, please, we can still answer the questions, please. Which are the alternatives? What would you propose to overcome the challenges? And what exercise do you know related to measure LGBTIQ plus data and in the LAC region? And finally, you can write down ideas and additional questions here, please. Karen Chavez, my colleague, will take note of these other questions, and I will go back to your initial answers. We have still some other main ideas about the data agenda in Q+. On one hand, we require conceptual framework established in a very joint manner through dialogues with different institutions and stakeholders, people, organizations, and also it is needed then to define criteria and also instruments and also indicators in this first process, okay? On the other hand, it's quite important to recognize that no one should be left outside in regards to this type of exercise. So in this sense, the first people in participating are LGBTQ plus people, and we recognize the importance of including stakeholders in this ecosystem of data, in this data dialogue. In this sense, we have to reach alliances or partnerships to have open source data, to share what has been done in different territories, to visualize and exchange experiences, and also to create an joint action plan about this topic. So another situation, we have a concern regarding security of data, the whole process that has to do with collection of data. It should respect confidentiality, and also, as was being said before in the panel, to work from a human rights focus, to talk about what has been done up till now about the statistical information currently there, and to recognize that this agenda that we're going to be building, it's also a struggle in regards to our story, and recognition. If we go to the second question about challenges faced to improve this availability, we can see that, first of all, we're required to disseminate information available, or the ones that we will get in the future, some type of pedagogy, promotion of a culture regarding data use, generation of data, and also it's needed to think on having practical tools for the access of data, not only to stay on the technical statistical side, and in the same manner, they talk about generating higher calls or meetings to state institutions that sometimes are, we're not having political will on behalf of those institutions and some territories to work with LGBTQ plus topics. So it's needed to have interinstitutional coordination within the state. And also we do have a vocation of calling to articulate, as we have said, understanding that we have different stakeholders from which we can learn, and also we can talk of what they have done, challenges they face, or good practices. In this sense, we can see that we have had 5 important aspects. On one hand, they should not stop saying that in the Latin region, Caribbean, we have territories that are very diverse. Population should be represented and working in these topics, and even and the government levels, they should also keep in mind this type of territorial focus to work with data to humanize numbers. We're interested on having mobilization of numbers to mention violence, but also other type of situations that are seen in a different way in our countries in the region. But also to think here on, I think it's quite important here to mention this, what does it mean to have data that are trying to be collected in the LGBTQ plus people? It's not only about making progress in regard to collecting data, but also how are they going to be used? And also to keep in mind that sometimes we will be having sensitive data. We need to keep in mind that whenever we work with this topic, we need to understand there's a huge diversity of expressions, recognitions, identities that also should be part of our language and in our agenda. So now I'll give the floor now to Karen Chavez. My colleague will present the answers of the last 3 questions that we have here. Karen, please go ahead. Okay, great, thank you. So let's answer here the other questions, challenges, proposals to overcome those challenges, and also to mention, I do not see many answers here, but also please, if you can, share with us what have you seen in your region to measure this type of, and if you have proposals for other questions that should be approached in the following meetings. Also, you can write them here in another open space. Also, you have it here. So, well, first of all, going to the different proposals that we have regarding how to overcome those challenges, we have different regarding teamwork. So as was being said here, to create synergies between different statistical institutions, the academia, and the territory, to have data agenda to be pertinent and close to communities. And also we have this invitation here, not to have a discussion only of the social civil society or only on the technical side of statistics. That's why that our colleague from the Statistical Division of UN was able to introduce the framework to include citizens and other stakeholders in the production of statistics. And a topic over which we can apply this framework is precisely to measure LGBT activities. I'm not going to be talking more here, but also keeping in mind time, and also invite you all to continue answering here. We will be having a summary document. And with this, I think we are almost ready to close our meeting. Okay, well, so let's give the floor to Karen Beth so she can close the meeting. Thank you very much. Please, Karen Beth, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you to all colleagues for staying with us for the last 2 hours. I think it's been a very interesting conversation, very exciting, just by seeing the number of people who've stayed with us for 2 hours. I think just a confirmation that this is an important topic and quite timely. Of course, thinking about the next steps from our side, both as the global partnership and our friends, represented by Karen and Aya, we're looking at a couple of next steps. We definitely want to synthesize all that we've had and seen and read today through the presentations, through the panel discussions. We'd like to summarize that, have a short report, which we'll share back with you, and of course, seek your input to further refine that. I think the message of a regional collaboration or a regional network, or something that brings all of us together, is very loud and clear, and I think that's something we want to continue pursuing and continue to nurture. I really enjoyed listening to the last sort of the 30 seconds remarks from all the panel speakers. And what stood out for me is just the importance of collaborating on this regional agenda. We need to ensure that we have government in the room, UN agencies, civil society, academia, and even the private sector, and really build a network, build a movement on data for LGBT. And as Caleb was mentioning, the struggle continues. It's been a struggle. We continue struggling. The more of us in the fight, in the movement, the better, so that we strengthen LGBT data. We ensure that small economies also thrive and see the value of this population group. And of course, this ultimately is around informing and influencing public policy, and that's why we exist, to serve the people we work with and influence policy for the betterment of people's lives. I think that what also came very clearly is just the importance of precise indicators, strong methodologies, harmonized, standards, methods of including these populations. And I think that's one of the key things that this collaboration or network will help us to do. Share best practice, share, lessons, be a space where we can learn from one another, but be also a space to define, methodologies, standards, and be able to roll that out across the region. So for me, it gives me so much pleasure to be making the closing remarks on behalf of the Global Partnership, and to thank you again. Thanks to all the speakers. Thanks to my two namesakes, Karen Chavez and Karen Anaya, for championing this, organizing this, and making it happen. And I believe this is just the beginning of the conversation, definitely not the end, just the beginning, and the best is yet to come, as they say. So with those few remarks, I just want to thank you, wish you a good rest of your day, and I will hand back to Karen and I believe, to wrap this up for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Let's close. I'll give the floor now to my colleague Gustavo, so he can give the closing words, key messages of today. Gustavo, thank you. Thanks again, Karen. Can you hear me well? Yes? Okay, ready. So, well, I would like to start sharing some ideas. As we know, we have here a consensus in regards to the reasons why we are here and why it is important to produce good data in regards to LGBTQ plus population, their livelihood conditions, their guarantee of their rights, challenges they face. And so in this regards, I think that we know well that all of this can be summarized with the feminist principle of what we are not naming does not exist. It's quite important. So as was being said before by Nikita at the beginning, that we need to have information to overcome statistical problems and the invisibilization that has been seen, and sometimes they do not make decisions to guarantee the rights of LGBTQ plus people, and also that they are not thinking on these communities whenever they think on this promise of the 2030 agenda regarding sustainable development, to not leave anyone behind. So I think it's quite important what was being said by Nikita, that it's important to make progress in this regard. That's something we're doing, among other things, because it is also, we need to recognize that we shouldn't wait. We cannot wait to have statistical information in a robust manner, adequate manner, comparable manner, systematic manner to start making decisions. It's needed to have this in parallel, to have information produced as we transform the discrimination situations and violence against LGBT people in practice, because that's the reason why we do not have information. That's why whenever we have started to make progress in this data collection processes, sometimes many people are not ready to make their sexual orientation, gender orientation public in the frameworks such as surveys, census, amongst others. So it's needed to make progress in the production of data, but also with information that we already have now, even though it's out of census, even though we still have some challenges regarding comparability, systematization, and so on, we should make decisions with the information that we have in order to transform from now this type of lively conditions. So I think that another message, and this processes here, as was being said before by Miguel Fuentes, also most of the people that intervene during this meeting, we should have a collaboration, mainly with the civil society, which is in some cases, in many contexts and countries, that one that have started to work on this, in part because the states were not doing it, because no one was doing it. So it has been civil society and LGBT organizations that have started to work on this. But also it's quite important to have this carried out with state organizations, with international bodies regarding human rights, and also development bodies. And so the World Bank, and also other UN organizations, the academia, such as the William Institution, universities of the region at each of the countries, and also contexts where this is being done. So I think it's quite interesting to what was being said by Miguel about the importance of having other people connected, such as the ones from the private sector. And all of this should be collected also in other type of frameworks, more developed frameworks, such as the ones that were being shared by the Copenhagen framework about citizens' data, the work carried out by the World Bank, and that has been leading this inclusion index in regards to LGBT zones, and how this is showing results in many countries, in many contexts, as was being said before, in Belize, Bolivia, Mexico. Other challenges to conclude, which are important to keep in mind, not only to produce information about LGBT people is important, as was being said before by Nikita, the variables should be included about sexual orientation, gender orientation, but also important to produce information that we need to have more information about sectors that people that have been invisible within the LGBT community. They mentioned about sexual characteristics, such as people that are still invisible, even more invisible than other groups, to produce information from an intersectional scope, because we need to recognize that LGBT people do not only have gender identity, sexual orientation, also sexual orientation or characteristics, we also have ethnical or racial orientation or specific. We can have disabilities as well. We can also be people that do not have a home, or maybe are in jail, or things like that. That's something quite important to show in data that is being produced, to make decisions in an adequate manner to guarantee our rights. Because as was being said before by Commissioner Clark, we have a structural discrimination that is fundamented on prejudice regarding gender orientation, sexual orientation, but it goes beyond. And also I wanted to highlight a message that was given by Luisa, which is important to produce information not only about violence, but also about livelihood conditions. And I think we can say that it's important to produce information not only about how we're dying, but also how we're living, how LGBT people are living. That's what I wanted to say as a closing remark. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Gustavo. With this, we close this meeting. I want to give thanks again for people that have joined this meeting. We will send you an email with our mural link and also all of the information that has been shared by panel members during this first dialogue. We hope to have your participation again in the second call. And I want to give thanks again that you can offer information that you were not able to share before, and also send this by email. Please, our email will be written down in our chat. Thank you very much. Karen, the floor is yours to close this meeting. Thank you. Okay, thanks again. We will get together again. So you will be receiving the invitation to at least 2 more meetings during this year. Please have a great day. Bye-bye.